Thank the gentleman. I'd like to recognize the gentlelady from California, Ms. Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Barnes, one thing that struck me about your testimony was your statement that joining Pillar 2 will strongly benefit U.S. headquartered companies. Pardon me. From hearing my colleagues on the other side of the aisle discuss the global minimum tax, you would think that the sky was falling. In fact, I think my Republican colleagues sometimes are simply panic merchants, just trying to throw everybody into a panic, claiming that calamity is going to strike if we try to enact policies that make wealthy and well-connected multinational businesses pay their fair share in taxes. And someone on the other side actually said, what is their fair share? And I would just submit that when you have huge multinational corporations that make billions of dollars in profit and they're paying less than 1% in taxes, we might want to start at least with what individuals pay, because in the United States, individuals pay minimally 10%, but up to 37%, with most Americans paying between 12 and 32% in taxes. So that would just be kind of a starting point for fairness, I would think, especially when you think about the fact that these multinational corporations often use our court systems when they have business disputes. They rely on our firefighters and police when emergencies arise, and on our national security, and yet they move their profits overseas to low-tax countries to avoid paying into these same systems that they all use and all rely on. That doesn't seem to me to be a very pro-American way to operate, to take and take and take from the system and to never pay their fair share into it. So could you elaborate why signing on to the global minimum tax will strongly benefit our domestic businesses? I'm interested in hearing, again, why it makes sense for us to go with this regime.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. Let me make two comments preliminarily. First, no corporation likes to pay $1 more than it's required to pay by the law. And that's why corporations have tax professionals like me to try to make sure they're fully compliant but not paying more than that. The second point is, I think what's critical here is that the U.S. companies are very capable of competing when the field is fair. And the minimum tax, in my view, helps ensure a fair field. We already have the GILTI rules. Other jurisdictions don't. There's what's called a participation exemption is the way many countries operate, and so they simply exempt the foreign earnings of their domestic companies. And indeed, one of our colleagues here on the panel has urged territoriality for the U.S. So why do I think it'll help the U.S. to have this rule? First, compliance. The U.S. compliance demands are extraordinarily difficult. I appreciate the comment about the challenges of the GLOBE return. If the U.S. is inside the tent, that is, if the U.S. is compliant with Pillar 2, then various safe harbors and other issues can be discussed in a way to reduce the compliance burden. U.S. companies will be subject to Pillar 2 regardless of what we do, because 130 other countries will adopt it. I think we will substantially reduce the compliance burden. The second is the competitiveness point. We pay GILTI. Other countries don't have a GILTI, and whether the rate is 5%, 10%, 15%, 40%, the point would be to have a rate in which the U.S. companies are not disadvantaged, and where there's a level playing field, I think U.S. companies win.
Okay, and given that that's the case, do you have any theories about why these businesses aren't banging down Congress's door demanding that we sign on to Pillar 2?
I do have theories, but I'm happy to also yield to my colleagues. I think there are two reasons. One is it is absolutely out of character for a corporation to say, raise my taxes. That goes against everything the corporation has stood for and lived for. And to stand up now and say, we think increasing taxes on corporations is favorable is just completely antithetical to what corporations are all about. The second reason, I think, is a belief, which I don't share, a belief that the U.S. GILTI regime will be declared fully compliant. So the U.S. has nothing else it needs to do. The U.S. GILTI rate will increase in 2 years, as many of you know. We'll still have the blending, but I think corporations are optimistic, I believe incorrectly, but are optimistic that the U.S. GILTI rule will be declared compliant.
Thank you so much for your testimony, and I yield back.
Thank you, gentlelady. I'd like to recognize the